The sun had just begun to sink behind the ragged cliffs of Arizona, spilling orange fire across the endless desert, when Samuel Avery tightened the worn leather reins of his horse, Dusty. The animal had carried him faithfully for years, through drought, storms, and lonely miles of frontier land. Dusty was more than a horse, he was Samuel's last companion. Everything else in his life, his wife, who had died in childbirth, his young son, who had been taken by fever, and even his small ranch, lost to a banker's foreclosure, had been stripped away, piece by painful piece. All that remained was a man with grief etched into his face, and a horse whose dark eyes seemed to carry a quiet understanding. Samuel had grown hard over the years, not because he lacked kindness, but because kindness had cost him dearly. Out on the frontier, giving too much of yourself could mean going hungry, losing your land, or even your life. He told himself again and again that he couldn't afford softness anymore. And yet, as he rode into the twilight that evening, he noticed movement by the edge of a dry riverbed, small, stumbling steps that didn't belong to any wild animal. At first, he thought it was a mirage. But then he saw her clearly, a young Apache girl, no older than 12 or 13, her braids tangled with dust, her moccasins worn thin, her lips cracked from thirst. She carried nothing but a small leather pouch and the courage in her dark, weary eyes. Samuel slowed Dusty and dismounted. "You lost?" he asked cautiously, though his voice came softer than he intended. The girl's English was broken, but her meaning clear. "No, lost. Looking. Tribe far. Hungry, no water." Samuel's chest tightened. He had seen starvation before. He remembered his son's fragile body, how he had begged for water Samuel could not provide. The memory burned him like hot iron. The girl swayed on her feet, her strength failing. She pointed a trembling hand toward Dusty. "Horse, trade," she whispered. Samuel blinked. "Trade? For what?" She reached into her pouch and held up a single, crumpled dollar bill. $1. That was all. She was asking to buy Dusty, the only friend Samuel had left, for a single dollar. His first instinct was to laugh bitterly at the absurdity. A horse like Dusty was worth more than a man's wages for months. Selling him for $1 wasn't a trade, it was madness. Without his horse, Samuel would be stranded, vulnerable, and lost in the vast desert. His horse was his survival. And yet, as he looked at the girl, dust clinging to her lashes, hunger hollowing her cheeks, he felt something break inside him. She wasn't bargaining for herself. He could see it in her eyes. She was desperate for someone else, for a sick mother, a starving sibling, or a tribe scattered by hardship. Samuel knew that look too well. He had worn it once, begging for medicine he could not afford. His throat tightened. He reached for Dusty's reins, then froze. Could he really do this? Could he give away the only thing tethering him to life? The girl pressed the dollar bill into his calloused hand. Her fingers were small, trembling, but full of stubborn pride. "Fair," she said simply. Samuel swallowed hard. Slowly, painfully, he nodded. "Fair." With that, he handed her Dusty's reins. The girl's face lit up, not with greed, but with tears of gratitude. She bowed her head, whispered something in Apache he couldn't understand, and mounted Dusty with practiced ease. Then, with a gentle kick, she rode away across the desert, leaving Samuel standing alone with nothing but the fading light and a single worn dollar in his palm. That night, Samuel slept on the cold ground beneath the stars. Hunger gnawed at him, but the emptiness in his chest ached worse. He had given away everything he had left, and for what? $1 that meant nothing. He told himself he was a fool. And yet, as he drifted into uneasy sleep, the image of the girl's grateful eyes haunted him. The next morning, Samuel awoke to the sound of hoofbeats. He sat up quickly, thinking perhaps outlaws had come across him. But as he shaded his eyes against the bright desert sun, what he saw made his breath catch. Riders. Dozens of them. No, hundreds. An entire Apache tribe swept across the plain like a wave, the morning sun flashing off their lances and beadwork. At the front rode the girl from yesterday, sitting tall on Dusty's back. Behind her were men with strong, stern faces, women carrying baskets, and children clinging to ponies. The ground shook beneath the power of so many hooves. Samuel scrambled to his feet, uncertain whether to flee or stand his ground. His heart pounded. The Apaches were known to defend their people fiercely, and he wondered if they believed he had wronged the girl. But then the riders slowed, circling around him in a great living wall. Silence fell. The girl slid off Dusty and hurried to an older man whose long hair was streaked with silver. She spoke quickly in Apache, gesturing toward Samuel, her words urgent. The man listened, his expression unreadable, then dismounted and walked toward Samuel. "You," the chief said in halting English, his voice deep and measured. "You trade horse. Why?" Samuel hesitated, then spoke the truth. "Because she needed it more than I did." The chief studied him for a long moment. Then, to Samuel's astonishment, the man pressed his fist to his chest in respect. The girl stepped forward, her eyes shining. "You, save me," she said softly. "Save tribe. Water, far. Horse carry me. Tell where we are. Bring them." Samuel's throat tightened as the realization struck him. His sacrifice had allowed her to reach her people in time. His horse had carried her far enough to find them, to lead them back to where they could survive. By giving Dusty away, he had given life to an entire tribe. Tears blurred Samuel's vision. He hadn't saved his own family. But somehow, he had saved hers. The chief lifted his hand, and at once, the tribe dismounted. From their packs and baskets, they began to lay gifts at Samuel's feet: woven blankets, beaded necklaces, food wrapped in leaves, water skins filled to the brim. A woman pressed roasted corn into his hands, another tied a necklace of turquoise around his neck. Children brought wildflowers, placing them gently at his boots. Samuel stood frozen, overwhelmed. He had given them a horse for $1. And in return, they were giving him everything a lonely man had lost: warmth, belonging, and a place among people who understood gratitude deeper than wealth. The chief spoke again. "One man's kindness, feed many. Today, you are brother." The word struck Samuel harder than any blow. Brother. For years, he had been nothing but a hollow shell of a man, wandering alone with grief as his only companion. Now, these strangers, people he had once been taught to fear, welcomed him as family. That evening, Samuel sat by their fires, eating until his stomach was full for the first time in months. Children laughed and tugged at his sleeves, eager for stories. The girl, whose name he learned was Ahioka, sat beside him, smiling shyly. And Dusty, faithful Dusty, grazed nearby, cared for and cherished. Samuel realized something that night: under the stars brighter than he had ever seen them, kindness was never truly lost. It had a way of circling back, growing, multiplying, until it returned like a flood. He had traded his horse for $1. But what he received in return was worth more than gold, more than land, more than all the riches he had ever dreamed of. He had found purpose. He had found family. And as the fire crackled and the tribe's songs rose into the desert night, Samuel Avery felt his heart heal, for the first time in years.